Welcome to Voices of the Gascoyne, the podcast series where we delve into the remarkable stories of the pastoralists who came before us. These men and women face their fair share of challenges, from day-to-day aspects of communication, transport and electricity, to natural disasters, market collapses, and the impacts of government policy. In this series, we reflect on their journeys and capture insights that can only be gained from having made it to the other side. You'll hear stories of their unacknowledged resilience. For them, it was simply life, but for us, it serves as both inspiration and a chance to learn for the future. Voices of the Gascoyne is a Gascoyne Catchments Group project made possible through support from FRRR's Helping Regional Communities Prepare for Drought initiative, funded by the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. In this episode, we speak to Joss and Jenny Percy. Joss Percy's childhood on Euthapena Station was cut short by drought and war. Instead of making mud cakes and mustering sheep, he changed schools 12 times in 3 years, as the threat of invasion dictated his father's postings in the army. After the war, the Percy family found their way to Wandina Station in the southern rangelands, initially as managers, then as owners. It didn't take long for Joss to adapt to station life again, as he worked on properties around the country before coming home as manager. It was during this time he met his future bride, Jenny, and together they embarked upon the management of a Williambury station in the Gascoyne for the next 30 years, before achieving their goal of purchasing the property. At the time of this recording, Joss and Jenny were ages 89 and 82. To start our conversation, I asked Joss to tell me about his earliest memories.
I was born in Meekatharra, grew up on Euthapena Station, which was not very far out of Meekatharra, and we left, I think, 1942. The drought had been, the father was pretty well run into the ground at Euthapena, with drought and so on. Well, the father, he never went overseas, which is lucky. By that time also they realised the invasion might come, so they needed blokes that knew the country available. So he was sent around the stations. They gave basic training. They were given ammunition and rifles and ammunition and basic uniform. And if they got the word, they were to sign a paper, get it away, and they were legal in the army. And they could wear the uniform and they went. I mean, if they'd been caught as a civilian fighting the enemy, I mean, that could be just shot on sight. I mean, that was illegal. So they had to be in one of the forces to be legally in combat. So that was why they were issued with the gear and the bloody papers and everything. And so they just sent it away and that they were legal in the army. But, well, the Japs never landed, so which was just as well. But it was probably a very difficult time for all. I remember we went back to Euthapena and packed up. And set the gear in, and we'd rented a flat in South Perth, so that had a garage. So we got all the gear down from Euthapena and stacked that in the garage, and I had a lot of change. We moved around quite a bit. I went to state school in Subiaco, South Perth, Northam, Geraldton, Mount Magnet, plus on correspondence several times. So, yes, I moved around quite a bit. In fact, we hardly did any school lessons at all. We were mainly learning what to do if the enemy arrived or the place was bombed or so. And the bigger boys, I was only a little boy, the bigger boys helped dig the trenches to run the school into if there was a air raid. But I was too young to get involved in the digging of that. And then I think we went to Mount Magnet. And the father was, he'd been refused, I couldn't go overseas. But they started getting prisoners coming over, and they needed somebody to look after them. So he was looking after prisoners of war, first of all, in the farming areas. Prisoners of war were given to farmers for labour, and he was sort of keeping an eye on those. And then when he went north, the chances of Japanese invasion were getting closer because he went up and he was training the crews on stations in guerrilla warfare. And they were issued with uniform and ammunition and rifles and all that sort of stuff.
By the time the war had ended, the Percy family no longer owned Euthapena Station. Joss's father, Reg, had spent the past several years in active service, a role which was no longer required. But, as fate would have it, it wouldn't be long before the family found their way back onto the land.
So after the war ended, somebody said, well, there's a chap from over east wanting to buy a station, and we want somebody who knows a bit about them to give them a hand. So that's how he met up with the Roach family, and he went and looked at about half a dozen stations and recommended Wanderer, and they asked him to take over the management of it. So which he did. So that's how we started at Wanderer.
Reg Percy accepted the manager's job at Wanderer Station on one condition, that he could purchase a share in the property. The owner, Mr. Roche, agreed to his terms, and with money borrowed from his sister Amy, Reg became a part owner of Wanderer, holding a 1/7 share.
Later on, he bought a bigger share. I don't know quite when we got the whole lot, I don't know. But I know the first time I met John Roach, I was at school and I was Wanderer, and he came up to have a look around and learn a bit about stations. He'd come out of the army, he'd been in the occupation force in Japan. So it must have been, I don't know really quite how long we'd been at Wanderer or anything like that by that time. But he was sent over by his father to start learning a bit about stations.
John Roche wasn't the only one who needed to learn about stations. In his memoir, Joss describes himself as a half-city kid, half-country boy who had missed out on several key learning experiences compared to other station kids by the time he moved to Wanderer at age 11, including being able to ride a horse. However, it didn't take long before he found his feet and started learning the ropes of station life.
Well, it's approximately 50 miles north of Mullawar. It was a station of moderate size. It was about 280,000 acres. A very thick country. Well, a lot of it was. There was some good saltbush country on it, and there was quite a bit of rough country. And of course, it was all horses then, and even the mill runs half the time were horses, because they were still rationing. Vehicles were scarce, so mill runs were done by horse as well.
The main mode of transportation in the late 40s was horse and cart, and this meant mill runs could take several days. While Wanderer did have 3 vehicles, a 1932 DeSoto, a 1938 Ford Ute, and a 1937 Intertruck, which barely ran, the fence lines were inaccessible to vehicles, so all fencing was done on horseback. While vehicles were seen to be more efficient than horses, they were few and far between after the war. One reason was the wear and tear endured by converting petrol vehicles to gas producers. During World War II, petrol was rationed and many people couldn't access it. One option was to install a gas producer, which used fuel made out of wood ash produced by burning large chunks of wood until it became what looked like coal. This method was not overly effective, but it did keep cars running somewhat.
And the wartime was very hard on vehicles because they all had to go on the gas producers. And they're hard on a vehicle. And I mean, they, at the time of the takeover, they were sort of, most stations were half, using horses a lot anyway. So, after the war, I mean, it became obvious that it was impractical to try and do mill runs by horse. And we were able to get, you had an allocation of a motor car. And I remember the first car that turned up, new car that I got was a 1946 Chev Ute. And that was quite a luxury vehicle compared to the other ones we had. So, yes, it was probably interesting times. A vehicle mill run took all day. By horse it took about two days. So the chap had to usually have to camp somewhere on the way. So, it's all changed quite a bit.
Wandena ran approximately 9,000 wool sheep. The overseer was Jim Clark, a former member of the World War I Light Horse Brigade. Jim was out in the mustering camp for about 4 to 5 months of the year. Joss started working in the mustering camp during the 1948 winter school holidays at the age of 13.
Those days, the mustering was very slow in that thick country, and you had to start mustering several months before shearing. In the very slow process. Take anything up to a week to clear out a paddock. You'd sort of go through once and then come back and do it again, pick up the stragglers. And
how many people would you need to go mustering?
Usually a team of about four or five. The overseer, that was his job to work out. He hopefully knew a bit about the country and where things were likely to be, and allocate, just ride along, one side of the paddock, and he'd strip a person off here, and then about another, half a mile, 3/4 mile on, he'd split another one off, and then we'd meet on the other side, and there'd probably be a mill or a quarter of a paddock or something like that, or something, and we'd meet there, and then we'd sort of start back the other way and use the other section of the paddock same way.
So this was all on horseback. There was no aircraft and no two-way radios?
No.
Did you used to call out to each other across the paddock, or who were you?
Not very much. Occasionally, if you thought there was somebody around, and occasionally, I mean, if you came across a very scattered group, I mean, you could, riding through thick country, and sometimes the visibility was only, several yards, and suddenly there's a sheep in front of you. So the idea was you'd back off a bit and say, now, try and listen, see where they were talking to each other, what's the sheep, and then just sort of get them moving, hopefully in the right direction, and sometimes another very scattered mob, there might be chap on that side might come over one route, and you might even meet up and then be able to sort of start working a bit of get them moving. And when sheep start moving, they automatically mob up a little bit. So the main thing was you just had to stand back. It didn't press you. When you're very green or didn't know much about it, you'd see a few sheep and you dash in and think, I got a few. And of course you scattered everything. So you just backed off and you just try and work out listening and where they might be, and then try and get them moving in the right direction and mobbing up. And you just sort of had to keep your wits about you a bit, and then you got onto the fence on the other side, hopefully, if you went very far from where you were meeting. And one or two, depending on the size of the mob, would be left for those. And they'd move them along the fence slowly, and the others would go back out and try and cover country again, to cover other areas.
Was there much of a presence of wild dogs back in those days?
Not there. There was occasional one. I know we found a track one time on the rabbit-proof fence. We had the Wandina had the rabbit-proof fence right along the northern boundary, so that acted as a dog barrier too to any dogs up north. So there were the odd dogs south of the rabbit-proof, but not many. And then if it got out east, there's a few more, but they weren't much of a worry for us there.
And so aside from the 4 or 5 people you would need for mustering, who else would be on the station? So you had your father, your mother, and your siblings, and yourself, and then some workers for mustering. Who else would be out there?
Oh, well, you had the cook. He was usually an old yardman. He used to do odd jobs around the homestead and that sort of thing, and whatever. That is either too old or inexperienced to be in the mustering camp, but he just filled in doing odd jobs and so on. So that was about it. The camp would be out for about that thick country. It was very slow mustering, and took about it was about for 3 or 4 months before shearing. So they'd be starting slow concentration, and then it sort of it had a couple of good paddocks that you put them into, and then just when shearing came up, you mustered and brought them into the holding paddocks.
Sounds like a very long process.
It was then, yes. Aircraft made a lot of difference, and they came in, aircraft and radio. It had cut the time by quite a considerable amount. Before aircraft, particularly in thick country, I mean, the aircraft would have cut the time by 2/3 sort of thing, because it's amazing, even in very thick country, you can see the sheep from above. That takes experience too. First few times trying aerial mustering is a bit disastrous.
In 1951, Joss headed off to Muresk Agricultural College, just outside of Perth. After 18 months, he was offered a jackaroo position at the Canoona Sheep Stud in South Australia. This was an opportunity too good to pass up, so he left Muresk early and headed home to Wandina for 6 months to prepare for the job. Canoona was far more intensive than Wandina, being 30,000 acres with 15,000 sheep and 140 paddocks. Joss says he learnt a lot about stud sheep, a fair bit about beer, and very little about girls during his time at Canoona. After a year away, Joss returned home and prepared to set off for his next job, this time a little closer to home, as a jackaroo at Sturt Meadows Station in Leonora, Western Australia. He was met at the rail station by the manager and part owner, Jeff Chomley, as well as an old school friend called Michael Folks Taylor. The job was set to be a whole new adventure for Joss. He had gone from 15,000 sheep on 30,000 acres at Canoona to the same number on 1 million acres at Sturt Meadows.
Well, it was a much bigger place, but much more open country, easier country to muster. Yeah, it was easier. Yeah, it didn't take as long to muster a paddock as it did in Wandina. I mean, we might take 4 or 5 days to clean out a paddock. At Sturt Meadows, usually you'd clean a paddock out in 2 days, maybe 3, but and some days you'd clean it out in a day. But no, prior to the war, there was still travelling stockmen that went around, and they had some of them had a couple of horses, a pack horse, and ready to turn up and looking for they'd go into a mustering camp or go onto an out camp.
So were people just travelling around looking for work?
Yeah, some were. It's just that's a bit before my time, really.
It sounds like I don't know if you'd call it brave or not, but it's one thing to go looking for work, but to go out that far remote and just with a horse, like you don't know how long it's going to be until you turn up to the next homestead.
Oh, well, I mean, they knew enough about the country and they're experienced people. And, the stockmen were only employed for a certain period as a rule. And usually there was you might have a more or less a chain reaction. I mean, you'd start here and then you'd move north and there'd be stations looking for people and that sort of thing. So that, and during the war there was, and after the fair shortage of labour, so that anybody with a bit of experience was get a job fairly quickly. Mm.
Was there a difference between the role of jackaroo and station hand, or would you use that word interchangeably?
No, jackaroo was a trainee station manager. Or was sort of, when I say trainee, no, he was cheap labour. He wasn't paid much. He was given his tucker.
And would they do the same work as a station hand?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they were out in the camp with the station hand.
Okay, so the jackaroo was like a junior version of the station hand.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then the overseer was underneath the manager?
Yeah. So the overseer was in charge of the mustering camp.
After a few years on the job, and shortly before his 21st birthday, Joss was promoted to overseer at Sturt Meadows. At that time, he decided to embark on a trip up north with Michael in a 1-ton ute borrowed from Michael's mother.
Michael Folkestone and I, we took a fortnight or 3 weeks off from this, and it was a slack time, and we travelled north. We went to Meeka there and then up the road. Called into a few stations. We knew a lot of people up there, or knew of them, or they knew us. They knew of the family. I mean, we went to, we'd go in and go into a station and say, introduce ourselves. Oh, I know your father. I know your father, or something. So we were ready. weren't complete unknown, and we were more just travelling. We needed to work now and again. And, if we could get a job for a fortnight or something, which we did a couple of times. But basically, we more needed we didn't have that much time. We couldn't have a good look around. So Roy Hill was one of the stations at that time, and it actually. It was overstaffed. I mean, it had more staff at the homestead in Sugarstick. I don't know who owned it, but the stations were either, there are 3 types of stations. They were pretty, when I say types, the owner-manager ones, and there's the ones that were one of the property-owned, family-owned, about 3 properties, and they probably had a manager on 1 or 2 of them. And then there were the big stations, which were company places that were run by a company. And some of them were owned by Eastern States. And, but I mean, the country was very isolated then. So, I mean, there were no bitumen roads. So you had a rain that closed the country up for a week because the roads were impassable. And, if the rivers ran, you couldn't cross them. No, it was totally different lifestyle then.
It sounds like you couldn't be too attached to any travel plans that you had, because there's a good chance that you might not.
Well, depending on the time of the year. In the summer, winter time, the summertime was reasonably well, that you kept an eye on the weather. The weather came with a warning, it'd be cyclone or something. But and he'd try and get into a township or something for that, because they'd be caught out on the run if they couldn't get across any rivers or something. You might run out of tucker.
In 1959, you went back to Wandena Station to take over as manager from your father at the age of 24. And while maybe some things hadn't changed since you were a child in terms of the infrastructure or the way the sheep were handled or mustered, one big change was about to come in, and that was the next year in 1960 when you first started using aircraft.
Yeah. Well, we started, I did, the first year, it was purely, I was experimenting. What I used to do, I'd muster, say, 3 paddocks, put a day in each paddock, and we'd try and clean those 3 paddocks out. Sometimes you'd be lucky you'd just about clean them out, otherwise sometimes there'd be, quite a lot left. So, you'd spend about a day, maybe 2 days in a paddock cleaning it out.
So was the aircraft actually used to move the livestock at that time, or were you just flying around looking for if anything had been left behind?
A bit of both. We were starting to move them. We're mainly, depending on the kind of country too. I mean, very thick country. You had to be very careful about trying to move them because you could get ahead of them very easily. It's all a matter of learning. I mean, we had a lot to learn. I'd make up maps of the paddocks, and the ground crew would be given a map each, and I'd carry one in the plane, or a couple in the plane, and as I spotted it, I'd mark, roughly where the sheep were, and then the horsemen would be waiting in a group. And then I'd drop the maps to them, and they'd have a look at those, and they'd make up their own mind where to go and how to go at it.
How did you work out how to drop the map so that it landed near the people and didn't go halfway across the boat?
Well, I used to use a buddy, have a tin, just a tin and a bit of weight in it. So it dropped fairly quickly, yes.
It's kind of like a missile coming at them.
Oh, not quite. No, they had to watch out for it, though.
And how detailed were these maps?
Some of them are fairly detailed. I had photographic maps of Wandena. Very early days, I got the because they'd done all these photo surveys, so I got the maps of Wandena. So I got those, and I was able to put some of the features on the map that were on the where very thick country was, creeks, that sort of thing, outcrops, and it was quite a big help because you had a rough idea where the sheep were. I mean, you could come up on them expecting them, not suddenly they're there and you make a wrong move and they take off.
And so in those early days, when you were drawing on the maps, you were a passenger in the plane with a pilot.
Yeah.
And then at some point you became the pilot.
Yeah.
How difficult was that to try and fly the plane, look at where you're going, mark the map and throw something out the window? Because it's not like a helicopter where you can just hover and wait. You're constantly moving in a fixed wing.
That was easy enough. But you just had to watch a bit. Yeah.
And this was obviously several years before radio communication came in with the ground crew?
Yeah, we started getting very basic radios. And they were a bit quite difficult to start. Some of them, you get 3 radio, you buy 3 radios, all supposed to be the same, but the frequencies wouldn't be quite the same. They weren't. They were very simple, very cheap radios. Well, not so cheap, but I mean that sort of radio was very, the frequencies be slightly off. They'd be able to hear, but not properly, and they had to be within within half a mile of them anyway. And it'd be handy if you try and spot them, and then drop the map to them where they were. But that could be, in that thick country, it's sometimes a bit hard to find them too.
It must have required a lot of patience to not be able to talk with the people on the ground properly and just having to write them notes and drop it out and then hope that they got the note and that they interpreted it the right way. And if you could see them doing something wrong, you weren't able to tell them, or if they were going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, well, you could shout at them.
Out of the airplane?
Yeah,
and they could hear it?
Yeah, you throttle right back and you're up about 50 feet. And
Sounds like that might have happened a few times.
Yeah, that did happen.
Do you have much time to say, do you have enough time to fly past and say a whole sentence, or do you just pick a few choice words?
Oh, no, the old Cub was a very slow aircraft. And if you were going into wind and flap down and run, if there was not much throttle, you not much faster horse anyway.
Well, there you go. That's not something I would have expected. Was there much from the older generation, your father's generation, were they encouraging of using aircraft, or was there resistance to it because this was something quite different from how things had always been done?
No, I think they were generally encouraged. There were a few that weren't, but I think my father, for instance, he was, when I first started, and before we had, I used to hire an aircraft in Mullawar. My father lived in Mullawar, so he came up with me a couple of times, and he got quite excited about how much you could see and shot.
And was it quite expensive to do as well?
Well, they were reasonably expensive, but then wool was worth a lot of money then. So to miss out on a couple of bales of wool would have been pay for a lot of aircraft.
And did the introduction of aircraft have an impact on the number of people working on the station? Did anybody feel like they needed less jackaroos or less station hands because of the efficiency gained using aircraft?
Not for a start, no.
Joss was kept fairly busy as manager of Wandina and only left the station a handful of times each year. It was on an annual trip to Perth for the Country Week cricket match that he met his future bride, a nursing student by the name of Jenny Rutter. Joss says that once he met Jenny, his trips to Perth increased exponentially. And while he first met Jenny in the city, she was no city girl.
Raised on Mount James Station, which is south of Mount Augustus.
It's a fair way out of town.
Yeah, 180 miles out of Meekatharra.
How did you like living in Perth while you were studying nursing compared to being out at Mount James? Did you like being in the city, or did you want to go back out bush?
Oh, no, the bush is much better.
Yeah. And so when you met Joss, you were based in Perth, but home was Mount James, and Joss was at Wandina. So how do you have a relationship that starts to blossom when you live so far apart? And these are the days before, transport took a long time to get anywhere. You didn't have the internet. Mail would have taken, did you have to write letters? How did you?
Yeah, you wrote letters. You certainly didn't make phone calls because the phones didn't work very well. They were on the top of fence line thing. So, you wrote letters, basically. I had gone to a ball and hadn't got home till about 5 o'clock and didn't pass an exam, and had an interview with the matron of the Royal Perth, who was a very crabby old thing. And she said that I couldn't stay on nursing.
Because you missed that one exam?
Hmm.
Is that because, and did you miss that exam because you were hanging out with Joss?
Well, it was only one night.
Bad influence, Joss.
And I said, oh, never mind, matron. I'm getting married, leaving to get married anyway. And that made her crosser.
She was probably expecting the opposite, for you to beg to stay.
Yeah.
And so you guys got married in 1962. So between meeting in 61 and getting married in 62, you didn't live together? Was it just letters the whole time?
I didn't live together in those days, I can tell you.
But, and was it just writing letters that whole year, or were you able to meet up to spend time together in person? Did you get to go out to Wandina?
I honestly can't remember now. But we didn't see each other that much.
No. Mainly letter writing.
Yeah.
And then after you were married, you moved out to Wandina?
Yeah.
What was that like for you being out there compared to growing up on Mount James?
Oh, well, everything was a bit closer. But I was the woman in charge of the house and the kitchen and stuff. So it had quite a responsibility.
So it sounds like, I guess at that time, for many women that got married and went out to stations, it was probably quite a hard transition for them to go from living in Perth to out to a station. But it sounds like it was almost easier for you because you'd been out at Mount James, and which is more remote and more isolated. And now you've come into Wandina, and so it's, not quite so hard.
Yeah.
Like you had a different experience to many people.
No.
A few years after you and Jenny got married, you moved up to Williambury Station. How did that come about?
Well, the company I was with that owned Wandina were interested in, getting into a bigger property or investing more money in the pastoral industry, and I wasn't interested in. Wandina was not a very big place, and I needed something a bit bigger to really, do things. So we started looking for other properties, and we went and inspected a few, and finally, about the third property we inspected was Williambury.
When you were looking for properties, what was the criteria that you were trying to meet?
Oh, well, it needed to be reasonably big, bigger than Wandina. In those days, you'd be looking at wanting something, about 15,000 sheep, basically, roughly about that era.
Was that the number of sheep you needed to be economically viable?
Not really. I mean, a good property. I mean, see, Wandina was only about 8,000 sheep, eight or nine, and it was quite profitable. But the bigger properties, of course, were better for management and better all round.
Sounds like you wanted a bigger challenge.
Oh yes, yeah. Wandina was an opportunity.
In 1964, the company purchased Williambury Station. Joss was scheduled to take over from the retiring manager, Dick Mead, on April 1. However, his arrival was delayed for two very good reasons: rain and the birth of his first son, Michael. So, after arriving a few days behind schedule, Joss had to wait another 6 weeks before Jenny and Michael would join him on the station. Joss says the first 5 years at Williambury were very busy. The property was run down as the result of absentee owners who gave the previous manager a very tight budget. In the first 18 months under new ownership, Joss put down 25 bores, equipped 12, rebuilt the homestead and quarters, and undertook 50 miles of fencing. You had a lot of work to do when you first got to Williambury. It had been quite run down. Why did you choose to purchase, out of all the properties you were looking at, you ended up choosing Williambury as the one to purchase? Why did you choose one that was so run down and required so much work?
I mean, it was the price. A couple of the other properties had been overrun. It worked out fairly well.
So the infrastructure might not have been the greatest, but the country was in better condition.
Well, it was, and although it was, it's still the bill, yeah.
Tell me about the work that you had to do in those first couple of years to bring the place up to scratch.
Well, it was very badly watered, so that it was a difficult country to get water in. So I was fortunately I was given a fairly open hand, and I think we put down a total of about 11 bores. Well, it was a difficult country to find water. It's a very broken country. There wasn't a lot of good watering points. Oh, well, you looked at the type of country. I mean, there's some types of country completely pointless looking for water. But Williambury was very broken country, a lot of it, and you could do a lot of dry drilling, which we did.
What is broken country?
There was a auriferous country and a country that didn't look very promising to find water in anyway.
And whose responsibility would it be to find water and to put in the bores? Was that you as manager, or would you have special people that came in to do that role?
Bit of both. I had a bloke who came in. We had a look at a couple of spots and that sort of thing. I learned a bit from him. A lot of them were put in from my knowledge, the recently gained knowledge, and some of them worked out very well.
How did you learn about how to manage the country on Williambury? Was there anyone to teach you, or was there like an agriculture department at the time that could share knowledge, or did you have to learn from people that, neighbours, or did you just have to figure it out on your own?
Oh, well, you just he took it to the country and really well. There was country. A lot of Williambury had been obviously overstocked and needed spilling or treating very lightly for a while. Other country hadn't been used much because there was no water on it. So the thing was to get water on that, so you could stock that reasonably well. So just general knowledge of the country. Mm.
So those first 18 months sound like they were very busy with a lot of water infrastructure, fencing and rebuilding the homestead being undertaken. But you also kept pretty busy, Jenny, because you had your first child.
Mm.
What was it like having a newborn out on a station?
Pretty scary at times. Yeah, I don't know, just muddle along, I suppose. He wanted something to drink at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the staff, stockmen, needed their breakfast about the same time. And we had a wood stove, of course. And so Joss was fanatical about breakfast on time. So he took up cooking the breakfast. And the girls that we had employed otherwise helped me later in the day, or help dish out the breakfast, I suppose, as well. But he made sure breakfast was on time.
So if the baby needed to be fed, so you had to choose between, I guess, feeding the baby on time or feeding the crew on time. So Joss had to step in, and because obviously the baby needs to be fed on time.
Yeah. And Joss wanted the staff to be fed on time. So, yeah.
Well, I was used to doing quite a lot of cooking anyway, so, because at one and a lot of the time I didn't have a cook, so everybody will be the cook as well. So.
Did you get lonely out there? Like if you the only person with a baby? Did you get to see other mums and children very often?
Oh, not very often, but they were close, like 30 miles away or something.
So 50 kilometres, I guess it's all relative how close that is, but you didn't get to, so you knew they were there, but you didn't actually get to see them and spend time with them.
Not often, but we had a phone, a landline, you turn the handle 6 times or whatever it was to get whichever neighbour you were ringing. And, yeah, I don't know, just got on with it.
Did it feel different being on a station before and after having a baby? Was it a big change for you?
No, life went on. I don't think there was much change.
She's pretty versatile.
Yeah. Do you want to tell me what you remember of that time, Joss, having Michael on the station?
Oh, well, I guess I didn't get involved very much. I was pretty busy, and I had to be away a lot. Not away, but I'm away from the homestead a lot, and sometimes all day, or maybe for a couple of days, and that sort of thing. Yeah, if I had a drilling contractor, I had to be with him a fair bit. Getting selecting bore sites and that sort of thing, but quite time consuming. So it was interesting times. Mm.
And so while Joss would take over some of the breakfast cooking, were you doing the other meals during the day? You still had like a full role of jobs to do on top of looking after the baby?
Yeah.
And so did you have anyone to help you at all?
Oh, yeah. Usually staff employed to help me, or an Aboriginal girl or something available to help. Got on with it, I suppose.
The year after you got to Williambury, that was a sheep station, the first cattle arrived. What was behind the decision to bring cattle to Williambury when it was formerly a sheep station only?
Oh, well, I think that, John was more interested by the owner. He was interested in cattle. I was quite keen to get cattle. So I bought a very small mob for a start. I bought, I think, something like 15 heifers and a bull. Or it might have been anyway, about 25 altogether. So that was just a little start.
And was the plan to run half sheep, half cattle to grow the numbers, or was it to eventually replace the sheep with cattle?
No, it was to very run half and half. And then, as the sheep, the sort of obviously on the way out, we decided it was probably pay to ready will turn over the cattle completely.
Yeah, so what I find particularly interesting is that the first cattle came to Williambury almost 30 years before the crash of the wool market. So a long time before, the writing was on the wall for sheep to be leaving the region. So at that point in time when you were growing your cattle numbers and you were still intending on keeping the sheep, did that require a lot of change to the infrastructure? Because now you had sheep and cattle sharing fences and watering points, or did you try and run them separately on the station?
No, the cattle were they were run with the sheep, basically. We did have small area which was totally cattle because it was suitable. But actually the combination works quite well. But I can't really. John was very keen to have cattle. I was keen to have a few cattle, and it worked out. It worked out all right. And then, when it came more and more obvious that the wool industry was on the way out, we had a start made. And, it made it easier to just, you were breeding, so you're breeding, you just weren't selling any breeders, and you were buying a few now and again.
In the early days, the road to Carnarvon was so poor that a trip to town took a whole day, including 25 gates and a great number of potholes and corrugations. At that time, Exmouth was being built, so the road was being used by heavy vehicles carting gear. Trips to town were few and far between and often dictated by school activities.
You got all the stores on the mail truck once a fortnight or once a week, depending on the way it was at the time. The fuel, vegetables, eggs, the whole lot, whatever you wanted, you got out in the mail truck. Because we were 265 k's out of town.
Your fuel came out in the mail truck, and if any major items you wanted, I mean, maybe you wanted a lot of fencing gear and that sort of stuff, where you could get a load out. But,
and staff without cars came out on a truck too.
I beg your pardon?
Staff didn't have a motor car.
Yeah, staff came out in the mail truck.
And how often would you get into town, Jenny?
Oh,
probably an average of about once every 6 weeks.
Yeah, it had.
Maybe.
It fluctuated quite a lot, of course.
One of those things. I mean, school time regulate a lot of it. When kids were coming up on holidays, they'd come to Carnarvon, so you could go pick them up.
And you had to be pretty careful because the kangaroos and emus wanting to share the road as well. And if anything went wrong, you had to be able to fix it. And we got into town, you'd stay the night somewhere and do your shopping. Sometimes it was involving school. Once the School of the Air started, which was about the year Michael started school, the School of the Air got going in Carnarvon.
So that sounds like that was good timing, that he started school when School of the Air started, because otherwise it would have just been correspondence.
Yeah.
And so School of the Air, so this would have been in the early 70s? Can you talk to me about School of the Air and what that was like in the 70s?
Oh, well, the School of the Air had a little, actually they finished up with the buildings, especially for School of Air in town. And we had our schoolroom out on the station. And teaching your own kids is pretty tricky.
What's that?
Teaching your own kids is pretty tricky.
And you had 3 kids to teach, didn't you?
Yeah. But we just have to muddle through with Mum. So that was pretty tricky.
What would an average school day look like?
Oh, well, we had a early starting time. It was probably, I can't remember what time it started, about 7 or 8 or something. It only,
it took up most of the morning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I had a policy that I'd only have one teacher in a year.
Like one governess?
Yeah.
And so if the governess left, you wouldn't hire another one. You would have to fill in.
I'd have to do it. And that was painful for the boys, ever.
Well, really, they should have been incentive for them to behave and not scare the governess away.
And
how did the days run?
Well, you'd get up at about 6, I suppose, and have breakfast, feed the chooks and a few little jobs like that, and then go into school. I don't know what time, probably close up 8 or 9 o'clock, I think. And at some stage during usually the morning, you'd have a School of Air lesson, which is just like going into a classroom for half an hour or whatever it was. And sometimes you'd have arguments with the kids about stuff. And they were pretty good mostly.
Were you also cooking at that same time when the kids were in school?
Oh, quite often.
So you'd be waking up, cooking for the crew, and going into the schoolroom, and back into the kitchen, and plus everything else that had to be done around the homestead.
Oh, yeah, that's sort of how it was.
Sounds like you were working longer hours than the jackaroos. Especially because I guess once work finishes, there's no time to clock off from being a mum either.
No. And, that's how it was. You sort of shrug and get on with it.
You became involved with an organisation called the Isolated Children's Parents Association. Can you tell me what that is and why you became involved?
Oh, it was all to do with school and getting the government to be interested in schooling as well. And the girls, mostly girls, and blokes have picked it up and devoted quite a lot of time to it and got the government interested in distance education.
So that required you to travel away from the station to go to meetings and meet with people down in the city to try and advocate for your kids in the bush.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were already so busy at being a mum to the kids and teaching them in the schoolroom and all your other jobs on the station. How did you find the time to be involved with that as well? It would have been a lot easier to say, oh, let somebody else do that.
Oh, you just got organised and did it.
It's a recurring theme with you. It was in the mid-1970s that you got your pilot's license as well. What spurred you to do that?
Lack of a mail truck was part of it.
Yeah.
We lost the mail truck. So we had no mail service.
Why did the mail truck stop operating?
Well, it's a contract, and nobody wanted the contract. So until they got things sorted out, we had no mail truck.
Mm.
So we had to go into town to get the mail or rely on somebody bringing it out.
Oh, and perishables.
And get our stores and everything go in. So sort of that was quite a tipping point in some ways.
Mm.
And whose idea was it for you to learn to fly? Was that yours, or did you bring that up, Joss?
I think it was general opinion.
I think it just grew.
Yeah, just thing.
And how did you feel about that? Like, that to me sounds like a terrifying thing to do. And who taught you? Who taught you how to fly?
Oh, we had an excellent
local flyer, local team, Woken Carnarvon.
Okay, so you didn't
extremely good.
You didn't go to your husband to learn to fly. Probably safer not to.
I don't think it's a very good idea, probably.
Yeah. I don't think he approved of that idea.
No, I don't think we can.
Mostly it was flying into town, pick up stores and things, or meet children from travelling home for holidays. Or
how long would it take you to fly into town?
An hour.
1 hour compared to the 4 or 5 hour drive by road and no gates.
No.
So did you quite enjoy flying, I suppose?
Yeah. But, I mean, a lot of the stuff is, well, that's how it is. You just get on with it.
Just adapt.
Yeah.
And do what needs to be done.
Mm. Yeah, it's the way it was.
What would you do for fun when you lived at Williambury?
Well, go for a picnic down the river, go rock hunting, and there are some extraordinary areas of fossils that were about 300 million years old. So they were quite fascinating.
Always something to go and have a look at. Holocross for the main one, which, probably about, I can't remember now, 3 or 4 times a year we'd have a meet somewhere.
Yeah, and this would be the big meeting. And then we'd have
Carnarvon or Gascoyne Junction.
And then we'd have a smaller gathering.
Yeah.
Within our own district.
Yeah, just about couple of other stations come in, and we'd have a bit of polo cross. And, we had a couple of polo cross arena, whatever you like to call it. Most stations had one. Some good, some bad, but ready to have a game on. We played quite a lot of tennis. I put in a tennis court.
Was it important to you to have something like the tennis court on the station, a place to kind of step away from work and have some recreation?
I think it's quite important, yes.
Was that something that was also from the previous generation as well, or was this sort of a new thing to have time off and?
No, I think, it was, the stations I'd worked on all had tennis courts, and, on the Murchison particularly, there was, tennis court was just about standard equipment. I think it was, considered quite normal. And, a lot of stations, had courts.
Would you play regularly throughout the year, or was it just during like the summer times when there wasn't as much stock work to do?
Oh, no, it could play any time it was convenient.
Yeah.
That's the beauty about tennis. It doesn't, particularly with a hard court, you don't need any preparation. If you've got an afternoon to spare, you've got a couple of people to play tennis, you can play tennis.
Yeah.
And you don't need a big play. It's not like cricket or something. You need a team. Yeah, really. You only need one other person to play tennis. You can have a game.
It was good to have a bit of social life as well.
Social life as much as anything. Tennis was that same thing. That was social life. But
because you realised it was good for you had to expose the children to another form of life, skills.
How hard was it to do things in terms of a social life when you're very busy running the station? Was it hard to take that time off work or to put the tools down and actually go and have some fun?
You get organised.
No. Depending on the time of year, but usually, you can make time. You're not going to do it halfway through shearing or so that sort of thing. But, normal times, you can usually, work things so you can get away from that. Yeah.
By 1972, the Williambury flock had reached 15,000 head of sheep, and a record 542 bales were shorn. 1975 was a dry year, and in 1976 the company decided to buy Muggery Station. This brought the total numbers to 22,000 sheep, 600 cattle and 120 horses. The drought didn't break until 1982, and as Joss writes in his memoir, it saw the end of polo cross and destroyed the social fabric of the bush.
Well, it just stopped raining. I don't know. We just, we had to get rid of a lot of cattle. Sheep, cattle, bit of both. Yeah, well, it didn't really go on for 7 or 8 years. We had, a couple of reasonable seasons in that period. Of course, you get a bit of a season and you might get too enthusiastic and restock a bit too much and have to get rid of them. But no, it's unpredictable. And of course, like anything like that, if you made the big decision and got rid of a lot of cattle or sheep or something, and a fortnight later it'd rain. Yeah, well, 1976 was it? Was that the year? We bought Muggery. There wasn't a great many opportunities to expand a station when things are good, because everybody's looking for a bit more country. And not many places get sold. But when Muggery came on the market, Yes, we were interested in buying it. And it was a bit of a question too, because it was a very run-down place. The manager was a very capable manager, but he wasn't given any money. And things were, well, really half the reason I sold it, I think, was David said, well, you either got to start spending money on and off. I think that's basically because he got sick of trying to do everything with not much. So, and that's when they decided to sell it. So that's how that. We didn't buy a place that was in good running order. Everything was pretty run down.
And it was also at the start of a bit of a dry period as well.
Well, it was, as it turned out, but we weren't to know that, were we?
How did the day-to-day life change between those good years and those dry years? What was the impact on, I suppose, the people, the animals and the country?
Well, I thought we got away less, and that's all there was to it. We had to do it. We had less staff, but we had less stock too. So,
so was that because the numbers are down? You didn't need as many people.
Well, partly, but I mean the thing we had to cut some things out. It just became a bit harder. That's all.
So when you have less staff, obviously that's less people to do the work, but the staff are also there as your community and like your friends and
Well, that's right, but half the time everybody would sometimes wonder why you had so many staff anyway. I mean, you still had to shear. And shearing takes, it's got to be handled a lot more carefully. But one of the things we did was sell a lot of sheep off shears. That's basically it. I mean, we did get rid of quite a few. We had a farm down at Geraldton, and we shipped a lot down there, and they transferred. They sold them from there, which was quite a help because we weren't looking for. They could get a bit more condition on them and sell them. It was quite handy, but it was still difficult times, and we did shear a few of the, but no, we got most of the wool off the sheep before they went. We didn't lose a lot of sheep in full wool. That we did sell a couple of bales of dead wool. It was pulled off sheep that died. But,
is that quite difficult to do? To shear a dead sheep?
Shear a dead, you don't shear it, you just pull the wool. Well, it's
there you go.
I don't know. I suppose you could shear a dead one, I don't know. I think we could. I think we did shear a couple of dead ones this year. Can't remember. But, no, a lot of wool's lost though. But luckily, I mean, we'd shorn not long before the real rot set in, and we were able to get rid of. We could see it coming, so we sold a lot off shears. We went into it with roughly very round figures, 21,000, and out of that, I think about 7,000 died. We got rid of 7,000, and 7,000 was finished up with 7,000. So that's very, very round figures.
What would you, before the drought broke, what were you thinking? Like, what was the plan to go forward into another year of drought if that had happened?
I don't know. I think we got rid of that last shearing, or that shearing we decided we had to get rid of a lot. And, the numbers, we just, our mustering, just a lot died as we busted or before. Just disappear. You don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
They disappear.
During your time at Williambury, you also started to experiment with regenerative agriculture and different ways of managing the land. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, well, I suppose we were looking at introducing grasses and spelling very eaten out country and trying sometimes I just had a tractor with a scarifier, which we tried ripping up some of the very hard areas, seeding that. Some of that was successful, some of that wasn't. Actually and seeding along creeks. Several different breeds of buffel grass we tried. And there was also a bit of saltbush tried. That was only in limited areas of saltbush we tried, and some of it worked, some of it didn't.
Where did you get your ideas from for all the things that you tried?
Oh, mostly just something to try. I don't know whether I've got them from anywhere. Some people were trying them, some people weren't. But I felt I'd started doing a bit of ripping up on Wandena, the previous station, so bare areas, to try and areas that had been hammered a bit, and we'd had a little bit of result there. And I think that this was a few years later, as we had the tractor and we got a scarifier or something, and we started ripping up country, and that was good for some areas, not good. In some areas, a bit dangerous, because you opened up the land and opened it up to the wind and erosion. You had to be fairly careful. But I did try, mixing it with a horse feed, and I said some of that worked. Some of it mightn't have got through the horse. I'd try. But a lot was, and I just used to have a bucket full of seed in the Land Rover, and I just toss it out occasionally in an area that might be helpful.
What were the results that you saw, like after the drought finished, and so you've got say that the rest of the 80s until you left in 95, like what results did you see in all the things that you tried?
Oh, some of them were quite good. But the spelling is the most successful. The country's got to be spelled, that hard country. The best thing is to spell it. The second best thing is to rip it up and seed it. And that depends on the type of country, whether it's worthwhile doing or not. Let's see, and it doesn't take a lot of you get the main aim was to establish seeding areas. I mean, you can't sort of rehabilitate the lot, but you try and an area, a paddock, you'd select an area and you'd seed it, and that would be the seed area, seed supply for that area. So that worked. And sometimes it worked well, sometimes it didn't, like everything else. And also seeding around waters, with the buffel grass and that sort of thing, which seeds fairly heavily, with the hope that as it seeded, the sheep would carry it out, which they did a bit, I think, but it all helps. Mm.
With the drought you had in the late 70s, early 80s, and then in the early 90s there was the wool market crash, which one was harder to manage
You don't manage either of them. I don't think there's such a thing as managing a drought or managing a... It just happens. I don't know. It's, I think the trouble is, like a lot of things, I mean, sometimes the decisions are left too long. You don't make the decision early enough. By the time you make the decision, it's too late.
How would you come to a decision?
I don't know. Desperation. Yeah, it depends. I mean, you get, you always, while there's a chance of rain, you wait for the rain. Then when you get past that point, you sort of start getting rid of sheep. You usually start getting rid of sheep too late.
In 1993, almost 30 years after you first arrived at Williambury, the two of you were able to purchase it off the owner who had the majority share of it.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Oh, well, achieve something. Yeah, that certainly changed your opinion a bit, but no, try to, it's changed you, changed things a bit, but not all that much. I suppose I always never quite sure whether I was doing the right thing every time.
And in 1995, the two of you left the station and moved down south.
Yeah.
Tell me about that time.
Well, we had the property. We bought the property as a depot, and then we moved down 2 years after we bought it, I think. I can't really remember. Anyway, so I was still fairly involved in Williambury quite a while, but and I was still doing a lot of the flying for Williambury, a lot of the mustering. But
were you still throwing maps out of the plane in small missiles?
No, we had radios and that sort of thing by then. A bit more advanced.
So by the time the two of you left Williambury in 1995, you'd spent the better part of 50-something years on stations because you'd both grown up on them as well and then worked on them. As we start to finish this conversation, I'd like to hear from you some of your observations on what changed during those 50 years, because I know during your childhood, we had the horse and cart, and now we're talking about airplanes with radios. Like, there's been huge changes in that time. What are some of your observations?
Well, I mean, that was, we introduced the aircraft. We bought, I don't know what, that made running a station a lot easier in some ways. It made you, it certainly made mustering easier or better. General, able to cut staff down a bit. But I don't know. I mean, it was just the general that the whole industry changed. The change started probably not long after the Second World War. But the change came quite, when I was, by the time I was manager, with the aircraft had started, and that was the biggest change. And radios, better roads. Some people, there were some stations that operated, with the aircraft. Oh, I don't know. I don't know whether that changed that much. I mean, it did change, but I mean, it was gradual. And I mean, there's the I think particularly for, we were one of the fairly early ones with aircraft. That was a major change. It made well, not only mustering, but things like mill runs and that sort of thing, and checking water. You could do that all improved. Some I think we probably started using them too much. So, which always happens, I think. However.
The two of you have been married for 63 years now. What would you say has been the key to remaining married, in love, and being able to live on a station together?
No, we just did it.
I don't know. You think of any reason?
No.
We haven't had any big rows.
No.
You've never tried to run away that I know of.
We have such a lovely family.
Yeah. No, we're very. That's a hard one. I don't know
What's the secret?
Well, there are plenty of other people who have done it.
Just get on with life.
I mean, we've all had a row or two, but really not all that much.
Row or twos haven't been high on our agenda. A rows or two have never been high on our agenda.
No, we haven't had too many. They've been pretty mild. She's never raced out and saying, I'm leaving and off.
I don't know, just...
Mutual respect, yes. Right.
Yeah, all I can say, mutual respect is... We've been playing copycats.